Alright, this recording is to show you how to add dimensions to drawing 5 and drawing 6, and the reason why we're doing this is because if you look at drawing 23 and 24 in your packet, it is asking you to add dimensions to drawing 5 and drawing 6. So you don't have to necessarily recreate drawing 5 and 6. All we're doing is we're adding dimensions to the drawings that you already have. Now, if when you add dimensions you notice that the dimensions are wrong, then probably a good idea to go back and correct drawings 5 and 6 so that the dimensioning is correct. Alright, so every dimension that we see here in drawing 5 we're going to add to our object. So your dimensions can be found in your annotation screen. You can either access it here in this box of tools, or you can go to annotate and access it from here. If you go to the annotate bar on top, you have a little more details than if you're just on the home screen. But if you're on the home screen, the dimension is right here. Default is linear, which will give you either a horizontal or vertical dimension. You can change it around. A line creates a dimension if you want to measure some kind of angled line that's not vertical. Angular is where you can dimension the value of an angle measurement. We don't really use arc length in the drawings that we have, but it is available. And then for circles and arcs, we're either going to use radius or diameter. So you just pay attention to what dimension is being requested and use the appropriate one. So first let's add linear dimensions to drawing 5. Notice how the dimensions are stacked, that the bigger the dimension is, the further to the outside that it goes. Again, here the smaller dimension goes closer to the object and the bigger dimension goes to the outside. Also, I want you to get in the habit of avoiding putting dimensions inside the shape itself. So technically we should put the radiuses where they move outside, although you do also want to limit how many times you're crossing dimension lines with your actual object lines at all possible. So I'm going to select linear dimension, so I can click here, or I can go to the annotate screen and I can select it here. It doesn't really matter which one you use. So the first thing I'm going to dimension the distance between my two circles. And you'll notice that I get lots of zeros at the end. To reduce the number of zeros that I have, what I want to do to reduce how many zeros I see, what I can do is come up here to standard and click this, and I do believe you have to access that from you can't do it from here, you have to go to the annotate menu, click on the standard here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to manage my dimension style, and I'm going to modify the dimension things that I have. And in the area where you go to reduce how many decimals you see, I'm going to go to primary units, and that's based on our precision. That tells you how many decimal places I'm going to see on my dimension. So notice if I want lots of decimals, I go to here. If I want fewer decimals, I go here. So since I'm seeing 2 decimals, 0.75 is my largest, I'm going to go ahead and set it as this right here, although I could go individually and change each one, but we're going to keep everything to have 2 decimals. So I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to close it, and notice that precision of that dimension changed. So let's add now. I want to measure, I want to be able to position the circles exactly. Whenever we're dimensioning, there's 2 types of dimensions, one's for size and one's for position. So right now what I'm doing is I'm positioning where those circles are located. Notice that I'm going 1 square away from the edge of my object, and it automatically draws the dimension lines and the arrows for you. Now let's go ahead and add the 3. I'm just going to click on the total width, and what I want to make sure happens is I don't want overlap, like you see here is overlapping, and I also don't want it really far away. You want to put it relatively close, and you want it to be staggered and equal spacing each time you stagger it. So if this is the spacing staggered here, I need to maintain the same spacing above. Okay, I'm also going to add the dimension here, and I'm going to add the dimension here. And one more small dimension is going to go over to here. Okay, so notice how all of these dimensions are 1 square away from the edge of my shape. I can add my dimension here, and again it's going to be 1 square past what I had before. So those are all of our linear dimensions. Then our radius is going to be dimension. We're just going to click on the arrow, select the radius command, and just click the edge of the circle that you want to dimension. So this one's going to be a radius of 1, and this one is going to be the radius of, I got to click the tool again, and this one's going to be a radius of 0.75. When we're looking at drawing 6, you're going to have to turn your snap off in order to dimension to the center of the circle. Notice that this dimension line actually goes down to the center of the circle. So you got to make sure that you turn your snap off so that you can actually access that center, because it's not on a grid corner. So when I add that dimension, I want to make sure I can highlight the center, and then I want to measure it to the edge. But when you place your dimension, make sure you turn your snap back on. Okay, so to access the center, you have to turn your snap off and then turn it back on to get good proper placement for where that's going to go. I'm going to go ahead and dimension the rest of this. Don't forget that we need to go in here, again, to show you how to change to some fewer decimal points. You go to the standard option, you click modify, go to primary units, and then you just adjust how many decimal places. Again, most units, we're going to go to 2 decimal places, and when I add this radius of this larger circle, I will only adjust that one to show that many units. So when I hit OK and close, then they're automatically going to adjust. Now when we're dimensioning the circle and the arc, you're going to need to turn your snap off. Okay, if we look at our drawing, notice that the big circle is dimensioned with a radius, while the smaller circle is dimensioned by the diameter. So please make sure that you use the appropriate dimension. Okay, so when I place that radius dimension, I see it's only giving me 2 decimal places, and it's rounded that second decimal place, which is not accurate enough for what we want. So we're going to change that in a second. And then for the second one, I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to choose the diameter dimension, and I'm going to click it and position it properly. So the last thing we're going to do here is I want to make sure that I can change this one back to 4. So remember, 4 was the default setting that we had. So if I click it, I come up here to the box, I'll notice there is an option to go back to, if I click on standard, which I had changed earlier, I'm going to only get 2, but if I go to annotative, it'll give me 4 decimals. So I can click on that and I can get my 4 decimal placings for that specific dimension. One last thing that you can do, let me undo what I just did. Notice if we want it to match exactly where we don't have any of those extra zeros that we want, we can set our precision to the highest decimal value. And so let's say we definitely need 4 decimals. So what I can do is I can come up here to manage my style. I'm going to modify my standard dimensioning. I'm going to go maximum of 4 decimals. Okay, and then notice down here it says 0 suppression. What I can do is I can eliminate any leading or trailing zeros, so that if there happens to be a 0 in the dimension, that is just extra zeros, then it's going to eliminate those. So when I click OK and go back to my drawing, notice that the 5.00 or 5.00000, now it just shows 5, 2.5. Notice 1.75 shows an extra dimension because I allowed up to 4 decimal places, but it didn't print any of the extra zeros. Here I see all 4 decimals because my precision was to 4 decimals. I just dropped all the extra zeros that I would have seen on everything else. So we could go back to drawing 5 and do the same thing. Again, to show you how to do that, you want to set your precision to the largest amount of decimals you need. So in this case I need 2 decimals for 0.75. You go up here to where it says standard, manage dimension styles. I'm going to modify and make sure your precision shows the maximum number of zeros you need, and then you can eliminate leading and trailing zeros. I'm going to show you what happens if I just get trailing zeros. Notice all of the 5s, 1.5s, 3s, they all just became large numbers, but the 0.75 still has a 0 in front. So if I don't want to see that 0, for instance, if I go back and look at the drawing 5, notice it does not have a 0 in front. I can also eliminate that by checking that one box to eliminate lead zeros, and you'll notice it just becomes R.75.